Inside USP Leavenworth, where the feds send the worst. Some prisons are built to punish. Others are built to disappear people from ordinary society. For more than a century, one federal prison has earned a reputation unlike almost any other in America. Behind towering stone walls and layers of steel, murderers, organized crime figures, violent gang members, prison killers, and inmates too dangerous for lower security institutions have all passed through its gates. This is United States Penitentiary Leavenworth. A place where respect can determine whether someone survives the week. And where even experienced criminals quickly learn that prison has its own rules. Before we step inside, subscribe if you enjoy deeply researched crime documentaries, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Because what happens beyond these walls is far different from what most people imagine. And the deeper we go, the darker this story becomes. The prison that helped define the federal system. When people hear about America's toughest federal prisons, one name usually comes to mind first. ADX Florence. The modern supermax. But decades before ADX Florence existed, USP Leavenworth had already become one of the most feared names in the federal prison system. Construction began in the late 19th century. By 1903, the prison officially opened. Unlike many state prisons built during the same era, Leavenworth was created to serve the growing federal prison population. Its architecture reflected the thinking of the time. Massive stone walls. Long corridors. Cell blocks designed for strict surveillance. The prison resembled an enormous military fortress more than a correctional facility. That comparison wasn't accidental. Nearby Fort Leavenworth had already established the region as an important military center. The prison itself became another symbol of federal authority. Over the next century, thousands of inmates would enter through its gates. Bank robbers, kidnappers, drug traffickers, organized crime leaders, domestic terrorists, violent gang members, political prisoners. Not everyone housed there was considered America's worst criminal. But many of them were considered among the federal system's most difficult to control. And that distinction shaped Leavenworth's identity. Unlike newer prisons designed with modern technology, Leavenworth was built during another era. Its thick stone construction created an intimidating atmosphere. Long echoing corridors. Heavy steel doors. Cell blocks where every sound seemed amplified. Veteran officers have often described the building itself as psychologically exhausting. The architecture reminds everyone inside that escape is almost impossible. Yet, ironically, one of the most famous prison escapes in federal history happened here. We'll come back to that remarkable story later. Because first, you have to understand what daily life actually looks like behind these walls. And why so many inmates say the hardest battle isn't against the guards. It's against the prison population itself. Entering the federal penitentiary. Every inmate entering USP Leavenworth experiences the same first lesson. Your previous life no longer matters. The moment federal transport arrives, everything changes. Personal belongings disappear. Clothing is replaced. Names become inmate numbers in official records. New arrivals move through a carefully controlled intake process involving identification, medical screening, interviews, classification, and security procedures. For many, the psychological impact begins before they even reach their housing unit. Doors open. Doors close. Each one locking automatically behind them. There is no turning back. Veteran inmates often watch newcomers carefully. Not because they're curious, but because every arrival changes the balance inside the institution. Is this person connected to a gang? Did they cooperate with investigators? Do they owe money outside? Do they have enemies already living here? Sometimes, those questions are answered before the inmate even reaches their assigned cell. Information travels surprisingly fast inside prison. Court paperwork. News reports. Street rumors. Gang intelligence. By the time someone walks into a housing unit, others may already know exactly who they are. That reputation can become either protection or a death sentence. The federal government classifies inmates according to security needs. USP Leavenworth houses high-security prisoners. That means individuals considered capable of violence, escape, or serious institutional misconduct. Many have lengthy criminal histories. Some arrive after causing problems at lower security institutions. Others are serving life sentences with little hope of release. When someone believes they have nothing left to lose, the rules inside prison change dramatically. And that's exactly what correctional officers prepare for every day. But surviving Leavenworth requires understanding something even more important. The official rules are only half the story. The unofficial rules carry far greater consequences. What happens when those unwritten rules are broken? We'll see next. The unwritten rules of survival. Every federal prison has an inmate culture. At USP Leavenworth, that culture has been shaped over more than a century by violence, discipline, and reputation. The Bureau of Prisons enforces official regulations. Every inmate receives written rules explaining what is permitted and what is prohibited. But inside the housing units, another set of expectations exists, rules that never appear in any handbook. New arrivals learn quickly that almost every action is noticed. Who they speak to, where they sit during meals, who they exercise with, how confidently they carry themselves, whether they appear frightened. In prison, fear has a way of attracting attention. That does not mean every nervous inmate becomes a victim. But experienced prisoners often notice hesitation long before correctional officers do. The first few weeks can be the most dangerous. Every interaction becomes a test. Can this person stand up for themselves? Will they respect boundaries? Can they be trusted? Or will they become someone others believe they can exploit? Sometimes those questions are answered peacefully. Other times, they are answered with violence. Many former federal inmates have described prison as a place where respect functions almost like currency. Respect cannot be bought. It cannot be demanded. It has to be earned and maintained. Something as simple as taking another inmate's assigned seat in the television area can create unnecessary tension. Using another person's property without permission may be interpreted as deliberate disrespect. Even walking through the wrong group during recreation can create suspicion if gang politics are involved. These situations may seem insignificant from the outside. Inside prison, they can escalate rapidly. That is one reason experienced inmates often advise newcomers to observe more than they speak. Watch. Listen. Understand the environment before making friends. Because alliances formed too quickly sometimes become dangerous liabilities. And in Leavenworth, everyone eventually learns that every housing unit has its own personalities, histories, and tensions. Some inmates spend years avoiding conflict. Others seem to carry conflict with them wherever they go. The difference often determines how long someone stays out of disciplinary segregation. But surviving the inmate population is only part of life inside. Every day begins under a strict schedule that leaves very little room for personal freedom. And once those doors unlock in the morning, the prison comes alive. A day inside USP Leavenworth. Life inside a federal penitentiary follows routine with remarkable precision. The schedule changes slightly depending on institutional needs, housing assignments, work details, and security concerns, but structure is everything. Long before sunrise, many inmates are already awake. Some exercise quietly inside cramped cells. Others read. Some simply wait for movement to begin. Then comes one of the most important moments of every day. The morning count. Correctional officers verify that every inmate is exactly where they are supposed to be. Counts happen repeatedly throughout the day. Nothing moves until every prisoner has been accounted for. If numbers do not match, the institution can immediately lock down. No movement. No meals outside the housing unit. No work assignments. No recreation. No visits. Everyone waits until the discrepancy is resolved. Most of the time, counts are routine. But they demonstrate one basic reality. The prison controls every minute. After count clears, inmates begin moving toward breakfast. Movement inside a high-security prison is carefully managed. Doors open only when authorized. Groups move according to schedules. Officers monitor corridors, stairwells, and intersections. Hundreds of people may be moving at once, yet every route is controlled. Breakfast itself is rarely a social event. Some inmates eat quickly before reporting to work assignments. Others return directly to their housing units. Meals are predictable, designed to meet nutritional requirements rather than personal preference. Complaints about prison food are common throughout the federal system. Still, meals become important markers in the daily routine. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. They break the long hours into manageable pieces. Between meals, many inmates report to prison jobs. Kitchen duty, laundry, maintenance, cleaning, education programs, vocational training. Depending on security status and institutional needs, work assignments vary considerably. For inmates serving decades or life sentences, routine becomes essential. Without structure, time itself begins to feel overwhelming. One former inmate described prison as living the same day thousands of times. Only the calendar changes. But beneath that predictable routine, unexpected violence can erupt without warning. And when it does, the entire institution reacts immediately. When the alarms sound, most days pass without major incidents. But every correctional officer knows that routine can disappear in seconds. An argument in the recreation yard. A dispute over gambling debts. A gang conflict. A personal grievance carried for months. Any of these can explode into violence. When an emergency alarm sounds, training takes over. Nearby officers respond first. Additional staff rush toward the location. Movement throughout nearby areas often stops immediately. Other inmates are ordered against walls or back into cells while staff secure the situation. Sometimes the incident ends quickly. Other times, the response becomes far larger. Weapons present one of the greatest dangers inside any prison. Although inmates have no legitimate access to knives, improvised weapons have appeared throughout correctional institutions for generations. Pieces of metal sharpened against concrete. Broken objects altered into stabbing instruments. Every search aims to find these items before they are used. Officers conduct routine cell inspections looking for contraband. Mattresses. Ventilation grills. Electrical fixtures. Books. Personal property. Almost anywhere can become a hiding place. Finding contraband is a constant battle. So is preventing organized violence. Unlike movies, prison fights rarely begin with dramatic speeches. Many occur suddenly. A brief exchange of words. A quick movement. Then chaos. Other inmates often move away immediately. Not necessarily out of fear, but because becoming involved can bring disciplinary consequences even for those who never threw a punch. Within moments, officers arrive. Orders are shouted. Restraints applied. Medical staff evaluate injuries. Investigators begin determining exactly what happened. Surveillance cameras help. Witness statements help. But prison investigations are rarely simple. Many inmates refuse to cooperate. Some genuinely did not see anything. Others follow a long-standing prison code against providing information. That silence can make solving assaults extremely difficult. And sometimes, it allows dangerous tensions to continue beneath the surface. Those hidden conflicts become even more complicated when prison gangs enter the picture. Because inside Leavenworth, power does not belong only to the institution. It also exists among the inmates themselves. And that invisible hierarchy influences nearly every aspect of prison life. What happens inside those organizations is even more complex than most people realize. The power structure behind the walls. Every prison has a visible chain of command. Wardens oversee the institution. Associate wardens supervise operations. Correctional officers enforce security on the housing units. Special Investigative Services, commonly known as SIS, monitor intelligence, gangs, contraband, and organized criminal activity. That is the official structure. But among the inmate population, another hierarchy often develops. It is informal. It changes over time. And it varies from one housing unit to another. In high-security federal prisons like USP Leavenworth, inmates often form social circles based on familiar backgrounds. Some know each other from the same city. Others from previous prisons. Some have family connections. Others are linked by criminal organizations that existed long before they entered federal custody. Not every group is violent. Not every close-knit circle is a gang. Many inmates simply associate with people they know or trust. But prison intelligence units pay close attention whenever organized influence begins affecting daily operations. Groups may attempt to control gambling, the distribution of contraband, access to certain areas, or intimidation of vulnerable inmates. Correctional officers work constantly to prevent any inmate organization from becoming more powerful than the institution itself. That is easier said than done. Many inmates serving long sentences become experts at reading people. They notice changes in behavior. They recognize unfamiliar faces. They observe who spends time together. Information travels surprisingly fast through informal conversations, recreation periods, work assignments, and shared living spaces. Sometimes a disagreement begins over something that happened hundreds of miles away on the street. Other times, it starts over something that happened only minutes earlier inside the prison. Either way, staff must evaluate whether an argument is isolated, or whether it signals a larger problem. This is where SIS investigators become especially important. Unlike regular correctional officers, SIS staff focus heavily on gathering intelligence. They review surveillance footage, interview inmates when appropriate, analyze mail that has been lawfully monitored, track patterns of violence, and work with outside law enforcement agencies when criminal activity continues behind bars. Because imprisonment does not always end organized crime. In some cases, criminal organizations have continued communicating from inside correctional facilities despite strict security measures. That is why federal prisons place enormous emphasis on monitoring communications. Telephone calls are generally recorded. Mail may be inspected in accordance with Bureau of Prisons regulations. Electronic messaging, where available, is also subject to monitoring under institutional policies. These systems are designed to prevent new crimes from being directed outside prison walls. But despite all these precautions, there is one commodity that remains almost impossible to eliminate completely: contraband. And wherever contraband exists, someone is willing to risk everything to obtain it. The hidden economy. Money does not circulate inside USP Leavenworth the way it does outside. Yet an economy exists all the same. Nearly every inmate depends on commissary. Once approved purchases are processed, inmates can buy limited items such as hygiene products, snacks, writing supplies, approved clothing, and other authorized goods using funds in their prison accounts. To someone on the outside, a package of instant coffee or a ramen soup may seem insignificant. Inside prison, those items can hold surprising value. They can be traded, saved, or used to settle informal debts. Most exchanges are harmless. One inmate may trade a snack for postage stamps. Another may exchange coffee for extra soap. But when gambling enters the picture, the atmosphere changes. Card games, sports predictions, friendly wagers. What begins as entertainment can quickly create debts. And prison debts are rarely forgotten. Unlike the outside world, there is no credit agency, no small claims court, no easy way to walk away from what is owed. An unpaid debt can become the beginning of intimidation, extortion, or violence. For that reason, many experienced inmates avoid gambling entirely. The risk simply outweighs the reward. Contraband creates even greater dangers. Federal prisons invest enormous resources into preventing prohibited items from entering the institution. Visitors are screened. Staff are monitored. Incoming mail is inspected under established procedures. Packages follow strict rules. Yet history has shown that determined individuals sometimes find ways to smuggle prohibited items into correctional facilities. Cell phones have become one of the most sought-after forms of contraband in modern prisons. A hidden phone can allow unauthorized communication with people outside the institution. That creates obvious security concerns. Drugs present another serious challenge. Illegal substances threaten not only inmate health but also institutional stability. Debt, addiction, and violence often follow. When intelligence suggests contraband is circulating, officers may conduct large-scale searches. Housing units can be searched from top to bottom. Cells emptied. Property examined. Walls inspected. Mattresses opened. Air vents checked. The process is thorough. It is disruptive. And sometimes it uncovers far more than investigators expected. But contraband is only one reason an entire prison might suddenly stop moving. Sometimes, the threat comes from the inmates themselves. And when that happens, USP Leavenworth can transform almost instantly. Lockdown. Few words change the atmosphere inside prison faster than one. Lockdown. When an institution enters lockdown, ordinary routines stop. Meals may be delivered directly to housing units. Programs are suspended. Visits are postponed. Recreation ends. Movement is reduced to only what is absolutely necessary. Lockdowns can occur for many reasons. A serious assault. The discovery of dangerous contraband. An attempted escape. A disturbance involving multiple inmates. Or the need to conduct a comprehensive security operation. For inmates, lockdown can feel endless. Hours blend into days. Days sometimes become weeks depending on the seriousness of the incident. Cells that already feel small become even smaller. Conversation is limited. Exercise opportunities disappear. The mental strain increases. Correctional officers experience pressure as well. Longer shifts. Higher alert levels. Additional searches. Constant vigilance. Everyone understands that restoring normal operations too quickly could create new risks. During major investigations, officers may search every cell in a housing unit. Thousands of personal items are inspected. Evidence is carefully documented. Any prohibited material is confiscated. Every discovery helps investigators piece together what happened. Sometimes the results confirm that an incident was isolated. Other times, they reveal a much larger problem involving multiple inmates. Those investigations have uncovered everything from homemade weapons to organized plans for violence. But while lockdowns are temporary, some prisoners spend years living under conditions that are restrictive every single day. Their world becomes dramatically smaller than that of the average inmate. And for them, isolation itself becomes another form of punishment. Life in the most restrictive housing. For some inmates, life at USP Leavenworth becomes even more restrictive. When prisoners are accused of serious disciplinary violations, are awaiting investigations, require protective custody, or present significant security concerns, they may be housed in the institution's special housing unit, commonly called the SHU. The SHU is not intended to be a permanent living arrangement. It serves specific administrative and disciplinary purposes within the federal prison system. The difference is immediately noticeable. Movement is tightly controlled. Time outside the cell is limited. Every trip, to a shower, medical appointment, or recreation area, takes place under close supervision. The silence can be unsettling. Instead of hundreds of conversations echoing through an open housing unit, there are long stretches where the loudest sounds are steel doors closing and officers conducting security rounds. Many inmates describe the greatest challenge not as physical hardship, but as psychological strain. Days begin to blend together. The routine barely changes. Meals arrive through the food slot. Officers conduct regular counts. Medical staff make rounds. Time moves slowly. Some inmates spend hours reading. Others write letters. Some exercise in the limited space available inside their cells. For those who struggle to adapt, isolation can become mentally exhausting. Correctional staff are trained to recognize signs of emotional distress and respond according to Bureau of Prisons policies. Mental health professionals also play an important role, evaluating inmates and providing treatment when appropriate. Even so, prolonged restriction is one of the most difficult experiences many prisoners ever face. Yet despite the security measures, Leavenworth has witnessed moments that challenged even the prison's formidable reputation. One event, in particular, shocked the federal government. The escape that embarrassed the federal system. A prison can earn its reputation through the people it holds. But it can also be remembered for the few who manage to get out. Over its long history, USP Leavenworth has experienced several escape attempts. Most failed quickly. Some never made it beyond the prison grounds. But a handful exposed weaknesses that forced the federal government to rethink security. Each successful escape became more than a local incident. It became a national manhunt. Law enforcement agencies coordinated across state lines. Roadblocks were established. Investigators interviewed staff, inmates, and witnesses. Every minute an escaped federal prisoner remained free increased the pressure on authorities. Those incidents eventually led to improvements in surveillance systems, perimeter security, inmate accountability procedures, and physical infrastructure. Modern federal prisons are the product of lessons learned over decades. Many of those lessons were expensive. Some were written in blood. Others were written in public embarrassment. Today, escapes from high-security federal institutions are extraordinarily rare. Not because prisoners have stopped trying, but because security has evolved dramatically. Still, no prison is judged only by its walls. It is judged by the people inside them. And few institutions have housed as many infamous names as USP Leavenworth. The men who passed through Leavenworth. Across more than a century, USP Leavenworth has confined an extraordinary range of federal offenders. Organized crime figures. Notorious bank robbers. Political extremists. Kidnappers. Drug traffickers. Violent repeat offenders. Some eventually rebuilt their lives after release. Others died in federal custody. Many were transferred to other institutions as the Bureau of Prisons expanded and reorganized its facilities. The prison became part of American criminal history not because of one famous inmate, but because generation after generation of high-risk offenders passed through its gates. For correctional officers, however, celebrity meant very little. Every inmate had to be counted. Every housing unit had to remain secure. Every disturbance had to be controlled. The mission never changed. Maintain order. Protect lives. Prevent escapes. Whether supervising an unknown inmate or one whose crimes filled newspaper headlines, the responsibility remained exactly the same. That responsibility is often overlooked. Most correctional officers work long shifts inside an environment where tension is always present, even on quiet days. The public usually hears about prisons only when something goes wrong. But countless days pass without making headlines because staff successfully prevent situations from escalating. It is demanding work, often unseen, and essential to the operation of the federal justice system. What Leavenworth really represents. From the outside, USP Leavenworth appears almost timeless. The limestone walls have stood for well over a century. Generations of correctional officers have walked the same corridors. Thousands of inmates have entered through the same gates. Yet every person who arrived carried a different story. Some were serving relatively short federal sentences. Others knew they would never again live outside prison walls. Some accepted responsibility for their crimes. Others insisted they had been wrongly convicted. Inside the prison, those personal histories mattered far less than daily conduct. Every morning, the same routines began again. Counts. Meals. Work assignments. Security checks. Recreation. Lock-ins. The rhythm rarely changed. For society, prisons represent accountability. For correctional staff, they represent responsibility. For inmates, they represent consequences, routine, and, in some cases, the hope of eventual release. USP Leavenworth has never been simply a building. It has been a reflection of how the federal government has approached punishment, security, and incarceration for more than 100 years. Its history includes violence, reform, discipline, failure, adaptation, and survival. It has witnessed some of the most dangerous offenders in federal custody. It has also witnessed people attempting to rebuild themselves after devastating mistakes. The prison's reputation was not created overnight. It was built over decades, through countless ordinary days punctuated by extraordinary events. And even today, behind those towering walls, life continues according to a schedule that never pauses. Steel doors still close. Counts are still conducted. Officers still patrol. And another generation of inmates learns the same lesson that every prisoner before them eventually discovered. Inside USP Leavenworth, freedom is measured not in miles, but in moments. Prisons like USP Leavenworth exist largely out of public view, yet they remain an important part of the federal justice system. Their history is filled with stories of violence, discipline, resilience, and difficult questions about crime, punishment, and rehabilitation. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, consider subscribing for more in-depth, fact-based documentaries exploring the world's most notorious prisons, infamous criminals, and landmark criminal cases.